All right, so guys, here is a tweet that has confirmed the Big Ten's future conference expansion plans. And guys, this is going to have an absolute major ripple effect on every Power 5 conference in college football, along with several Group of 5 conferences. It says Big Ten's Kevin Warren tells Real Sports HBO he sees Big Ten having 20 members and paying players. So they're talking about paying players, whatever. Guys, I'm more focused on Kevin Warren coming out publicly and saying the Big Ten is going to 20 teams. My expectation is they do want the West Wing. It makes too much sense. Whether or not they can get Notre Dame, we'll see. Right now, it's looking like Notre Dame is leaning towards being an independent with an expanded playoff. That would certainly make sense, and Notre Dame values the idea, the mystique that they are an independent. But guys, my prediction right now would be Stanford, California, Washington, and Oregon headed to the Big Ten. And you want to talk about the ripple effect of this in terms of the college football landscape. I really think, and we're going to get to it, number one, the Pac-12 is just, I said in my last video, it's pretty much killed if this situation plays out. If Oregon and Washington leave, right now it's a situation where Oregon and Washington are holding the Pac-12 together with duct tape. And my guess is they want to do some sort of crappy year-to-year TV deal with ESPN that with zero exit fee. So at any point, whether it's next year in 2025 and 2026, whenever, when the Big Ten comes calling, those teams, along with probably Stanford and California, if Notre Dame does want to be an independent, if Notre Dame wants to stay an independent, it'll be Stanford and Cal as well. Those teams headed to the Big Ten. And then the next major question, the big elephant in the room, what happens to the Pac-12? Also, what happens to the ACC? And we're going to get to that. And it says here, sources indicate that today's news has caused more concern within the Pac-12 conference. Gee, you think? That's like the Titanic hitting an iceberg and they're like, oh, we're more concerned. Yeah, I mean, this is really, really bad news if the Big Ten wants to get to 20 teams and the rumored West Wing target, the end game for the Big Ten, at least right now, is 20 teams. And apparently, with the expansion, the Big Ten, it gives them a possible late window with ESPN. So that was the whole idea. Maybe ESPN and the Big Ten aren't done. They can reopen negotiations if more teams join the conference, and you could potentially give ESPN their own deal. It wouldn't be at 7:30, obviously. It wouldn't be at 3:30, obviously. CBS and NBC have already shelled out major bucks to have those two windows for Big Ten games. But it would be the late night 10:30 window. If you add those West Coast teams every single week, you would have a big late night game, whether USC was at home playing at 10:30, UCLA was at home playing at 10:30, Oregon's at home playing at 10:30. That would be a pack. And this is how more money gets made. You expand the overall conference. You mitigate the travel concerns. This 20-team super conference with possibly 5 or 6 teams being from the West Coast makes so much sense. Not just from the travel, not just from the money, but just in general, the way how lopsided the conference is right now, you could really try and even it out by putting more teams on the West Coast. So Kevin Warren has come out and he said, this is going to happen. We want 20 teams in the conference. I'm making it public right now because I'm sure he probably is very confident this is happening. Otherwise, he wouldn't be making it publicly known that he wants 20 teams. The end game right now for the Big Ten is 20 teams. And guys, thinking about this situation, the Pac-12 immediately dissolves. The ACC immediately becomes in significant trouble because, guys, this is the ripple effect. The Big Ten gets to 20 teams. What is the SEC going to want to do? The SEC is going to want to snipe teams off and poach teams from the ACC. They've got a horrible grant of rights deal. The ACC is in an extremely bad spot The only chance, in my opinion, if the Big Ten goes to 20 teams due to the ripple effect it will cause, which will be an SEC expansion, the only way the ACC survives is if ESPN saves them with a brand new renegotiated media rights deal. You cannot do unequal revenue in the ACC. There's not enough money to go around. And what I mean by that is if you're giving more money to Clemson, to Florida State, because they're getting screwed right now, if you give them more money to try and keep them in the ACC, you're taking money from Georgia Tech. You're taking money from NC State. And the problem is they simply are not going to be paid enough to want to remain in the conference. You're going to see NC State want to leave. They'd want to join the Big 12 or wherever. Georgia Tech, same thing. So the situation for the ACC, I'm looking forward. I'm projecting the ripple effect this is going to have. Guys, I am not seeing a good situation right now in terms of the ACC for college football because they have a horrible grant of rights deal. Maybe ESPN says we want to make the ACC survive, so they give them a brand new fair TV rights deal, which could certainly happen, where it would make sense for Georgia Tech, NC State, Boston College, Wake Forest to stay in the conference. The other issue is if you don't do the unequal revenue, now Clemson's getting paid nothing. Now Florida State's getting paid nothing. Even if you give them a bump up, they would still make so much more going to the SEC. So then it becomes a race to see if the ACC can get enough teams to agree to dissolve the conference. And it would be Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, because of the Atlanta area. Georgia Tech would be wanted, in my opinion, in expansion. It would be teams like that. Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, possibly North Carolina and Duke, depending on if Duke is wanted with North Carolina. North Carolina is an extremely attractive team, and we'll see if they could get to 8 teams, which is what they would need to dissolve the ACC. So this stuff, you have to think not just about the effects it's going to have on the Big Ten and the Pac-12. My immediate reaction, if the Big Ten goes to 20 teams, Arizona State, Arizona, Arizona State, Arizona, Utah, Colorado are all going to the Big 12. So that would put the Big 12 now at 16 teams. And then you would have Washington State and Oregon State heading to the Mountain West in this scenario. This is what I think at this point is the most likely situation. Is there a way that the Pac-12 can salvage the conference after losing possibly Oregon and Washington? I don't see a path at all where they can salvage the conference at that point, because you already have the situation with the Big 12 trying to poach the 4 schools, and your TV contract is only going to get worse if you're in the Pac-12, if Oregon and Washington leave. So this is like the worst nightmare possible. And the Pac-12's fate right now is being decided by the Big Ten, and Kevin Warren is saying, listen, we want 20 teams, we want a West Wing, and the teams we're adding, whether Notre Dame wants in or not, we really don't care. We'll just take Stanford and Cal along with Oregon and Washington, which will completely destroy the Pac-12. And at that point, I think it becomes danger zone for the ACC, because nobody in the ACC wants to talk about their horrible grant of rights deal. It is the elephant in the room, and it's not going to be that way for long, especially if this happens, because you're going to have the SEC start knocking on Clemson's door, start knocking on Florida State's door, and say, listen, the Big Ten got to 20 teams. We have to at least match them. The reason the SEC is not doing anything right now, you know, there's been several reports they're staying pat. It's because the Big Ten is at 16 teams and the SEC is at 16 teams. There's no reason for them to do anything. They're mainly focused on going to a 9-game conference schedule once the 12-team playoff is announced. That's the SEC's next hurdle. But if these things, you know, it'll depend how quickly does this move? How quickly do we see Oregon and Washington and possibly 2 others from the Pac-12 join the Big Ten? After that happens, that's going to trigger an effect by the SEC, and then that's when the whole ACC grant of rights thing comes into effect. So I'm projecting forward on the next steps. The Pac-12 dies if this happens. The Big 12 at least gets to 16 teams. And the ACC, there's a big problem with the ACC and their grant of rights deal because the SEC is going to be pounding on those teams' doors. North Carolina, FSU, Miami, Clemson, obviously. Those are the type of teams they would want to get to 20 teams. And this is all breaking right now, guys. The major stuff. Once again, I'll read this one more time. This coming out this morning. Kevin Warren telling Real Sports HBO he sees the Big Ten having 20 members. That is the end game, and based on everything we've heard, all the rumors, all the intel, the 4 teams will, 3 of the teams at least will be from the Pac-12, if not all 4, depending on what Notre Dame does. There was speculation that maybe the Big Ten goes to the ACC. I think Virginia would be a great fit in the Big Ten. I think even a team like Georgia Tech, North Carolina, those would be really good fits in the Big Ten. But right now, and you think about it, it makes complete sense. Mitigate the travel concerns. Give yourself a literal West Wing to where you can create conference pods with 20 teams in your league and really balance the conference out in terms of the geographics of it all and things like that. And then possibly the other scenario is maybe ESPN does get some Big Ten games after all, and it would be like the Big Ten After Dark type deal where, think about this idea. The Big Ten gets to 20 teams. They partner with ESPN for the late night 10:30 window. This is the Big Ten's lineup. Big noon on Fox, 3:30 on CBS, 7:30 on NBC, 10:30 on ESPN. That is the Big Ten's mega plan. I'm speculating. I'm just thinking that's their mega plan to get that extra time window. And if you add 4 West Coast teams, you're going to have a good game basically every week within the conference starting at 10:30 at night. They want to take over college football with every time zone. They want the noon, they want the 3:30, they want the 7:30, and maybe they get a deal with ESPN for the 10 o'clock Eastern time window. And this is just crazy, crazy stuff. I'm playing it all in my head. I'm concerned for the ACC. At this point, I think the Pac-12 is unsavable. I don't see a scenario just looking at it. If they lose Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten, I don't see how they survive because it's a snowball. The deal is going to get worse. Oregon and Washington are by far the most attractive brands in that conference. If they leave, the TV deal is going to be so bad, there's going to be zero reason for Utah, Arizona State, Colorado to want to stay and play in that conference with a horrible TV deal when they could just go to the Big 12 and make double. So this is all the ripple effects of this situation, guys. I think obviously the next big thing is the Big Ten expanding, but after that, everyone looks at the ACC, and the next huge story is going to be the ACC grant of rights deal. I'm telling you, after this situation gets resolved, the SEC is going to look at the ACC, and it's going to be this, who can get to 20 teams, and the Big Ten's going to get there probably first, and then the SEC will have a reaction, and it's going to get real messy. So we will continue to update you guys on this situation. It is evolving. It is absolutely critical. This is huge stuff. We've got people publicly saying the Big Ten is going to 20 teams. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.